It was a quiet winter night in a small Maine town, until a 20-month-old girl vanished from her crib. Blood was found, but no body, no signs of a break-in. This case will shock you, because the answers may lie inside her own family's home. On the night of December 16, 2011, the small town of Waterville, Maine was wrapped in the stillness of early winter. Christmas lights glowed softly in the windows, and the streets were quiet, the kind of night when nothing bad was supposed to happen. But inside a modest home on Violet Avenue, something unthinkable was unfolding. 20-month-old Ayla Reynolds was sleeping in her crib, or so her father, Justin DePietro, would later say. It had been a routine evening. Justin was at home with his sister Alicia, his girlfriend Courtney, and their baby. According to him, he had put Ayla to bed around 8 o'clock, kissed her goodnight, and gone to watch TV. When he checked again in the morning, her bed was empty. The story made no sense. Not to police, not to the neighbors, and especially not to Ayla's mother, Trista Reynolds. Trista and Justin had been separated. She had left Ayla in Justin's temporary custody while she entered a rehab program, hoping to rebuild stability for her daughter. But what was meant to be a short arrangement turned into a nightmare. At 8:51 a.m. on December 17th, Justin called 911. His voice, on the recording later released to the public, was calm. Too calm. "My daughter is missing," he said. "She was here last night. I don't know where she is." Within minutes, Waterville police responded. Officers searched the house, the yard, the garage, and the surrounding neighborhood. They knocked on every door. Neighbors woke to the sight of police cruisers and flashing lights, the silence of the early morning shattered by urgency. By noon, the search had grown massive. State police joined in. Firefighters, volunteers, and K-9 units combed through backyards and woodlots. Drones and helicopters scanned the frozen ground from above. The temperature was dropping, and officers feared the worst, that a toddler had wandered outside and succumbed to the cold. But there were no footprints in the snow. No broken locks, no sign of forced entry. The possibility that someone had taken Ayla became harder to ignore. As hours passed, the story spread across Maine. Local news stations cut into their broadcasts. The face of a little blonde girl with bright eyes appeared on every screen. Reporters stood outside the DePietro home, narrating live updates as investigators moved in and out of the house. The community, desperate for hope, gathered to search. Hundreds of volunteers lined up at dawn with flashlights and gloves, trudging through frozen fields and dense woods. But behind the scenes, police were growing suspicious. Something about Justin's story didn't add up. He claimed Ayla had been wearing her soft one-piece pajamas when she disappeared. He said he'd locked the doors that night, and that the only people in the house were family. Yet, when officers asked him detailed questions, his answers shifted. One minute he said he went to bed at midnight. The next, he said 2 a.m. He couldn't explain certain noises heard by neighbors, or why no one had seen or heard Ayla leave. Then came the first major break in the case, and it was chilling. Inside the home, forensic teams discovered traces of blood, small at first on the bedding, then more, smeared on the floor, on the side of a mattress, and near the stairs leading to the basement. DNA tests confirmed what everyone feared. The blood belonged to Ayla Reynolds. Investigators didn't say how much blood there was, but one police source called it significant. Enough to indicate an injury, and perhaps something worse. Still, Justin DePietro insisted his daughter had been kidnapped. "Someone took her," he told reporters. "I would never hurt my child." His family stood behind him, repeating the same defense. But the evidence inside the home suggested otherwise. There were no signs of a break-in, no footprints leading away from the house, and no ransom note. Nothing to support his story. Meanwhile, Trista Reynolds, Ayla's mother, stood outside the police station, trembling as she spoke to the media. My baby is out there somewhere, she said, her voice breaking. And I'm not going to stop until I bring her home. The contrast between the parents could not have been sharper. Trista's grief was raw, desperate, and public. Justin's demeanor, on the other hand, seemed detached, defensive. When reporters asked him if he thought police suspected him, he replied coldly, "I think they're wrong." Days turned into weeks. The searches expanded for miles around Waterville, rivers, forests, and drainage systems. Hundreds of tips came in, each one investigated, none leading anywhere. Police drained parts of the Kennebec River, scoured garbage dumps, and interviewed every possible witness. But Ayla was gone. With no body, no weapon, and no confession, the case stalled. Public pressure grew fierce. Protesters gathered outside the DiPietro home, holding signs that read, "Where is Ayla?" and "Tell the truth." Some shouted Justin's name, demanding answers. Others left candles, flowers, and stuffed animals on the sidewalk, a makeshift shrine for a child whose story had become a national obsession. Inside the police department, detectives refused to give up. They knew something terrible had happened inside that house. The blood, the inconsistencies, the silence. It all pointed to one conclusion. But until they found Ayla, there would be no justice. By early 2012, the search for Ayla Reynolds had become the largest criminal investigation in Maine's history. And yet, despite hundreds of officers, countless volunteers, and mountains of evidence, there was still no trace of the little girl. The town of Waterville no longer slept easily. Parents double-locked their doors. Strangers eyed one another with suspicion. And beneath the falling snow, one question haunted every heart. If Ayla didn't walk out of that house, then who carried her out? As days turned into months, the investigation into Ayla Reynolds' disappearance shifted from the woods and rivers of Waterville to the very walls of the home on Violet Avenue. The house that once looked like an ordinary family home had become a place of haunting silence, a crime scene frozen in time. Behind closed doors, detectives worked tirelessly. They went through every inch of the DiPietro residence, every photograph, every stain, every story told, and slowly a different picture began to emerge. One that didn't match the version given by Ayla's father, Justin DiPietro. From the beginning, Justin had insisted that his daughter had been kidnapped in the middle of the night. No forced entry, no noise, no witnesses. He said he'd gone to bed after putting her down and woken up to find her gone. But investigators began to question how a stranger could have entered a locked house without leaving a trace, or why a kidnapper would take nothing but the child and leave behind her blanket, her pacifier, and her shoes. Detectives also questioned the timeline. Justin's story shifted with every interview. At one point, he said he had gone to check on Ayla at midnight. Later it became 2 a.m. Then, in another version, he claimed not to have checked on her at all until morning. When police pressed him, he grew defensive. Adding to the mystery were the other two adults in the house that night, Justin's sister Alicia and his girlfriend Courtney Roberts. Both claimed they were asleep and heard nothing. Yet, evidence told another story. Investigators discovered that one of their cell phones had sent text messages at 2 a.m., right around the time police believed something had happened to Ayla. When questioned about the messages, they couldn't explain them. The deeper police dug, the more disturbing details surfaced. Forensic analysis revealed multiple areas of blood inside the home, not just small spots, but larger patterns consistent with cleanup. Blood had been found on Ayla's mattress, on her pajamas, and on a car seat stored in the basement. There were also traces leading toward the washing machine and the stairs. DNA tests confirmed the worst. The blood belonged to Ayla. Still, Justin DiPietro maintained his innocence. "I loved my daughter," he told reporters. "I would never hurt her. Someone took her. That's all I know." But his behavior after the disappearance only raised more suspicion. While Trista Reynolds, Ayla's mother, stood in front of cameras begging for her daughter's return, Justin avoided interviews. He refused to participate in a second polygraph test. At times, he appeared irritated by the media, accusing reporters of twisting the story. To the public, it seemed as though he wanted the attention to go away more than he wanted answers. Meanwhile, Trista refused to stay silent. In interviews, she described the fear and helplessness that consumed her. "I trusted him," she said, tears in her eyes. "I thought my daughter was safe with her father. I was wrong." She began pushing investigators harder, demanding updates and asking questions that Justin wouldn't answer. Why had Ayla's blood been found in the basement? Why hadn't he called her the night Ayla went missing? And why, weeks later, did he seem more focused on clearing his name than finding his child? Public opinion turned sharply against Justin. Protesters gathered outside his house. They held signs that read, "Where's Ayla?" and "Tell the truth, Justin." He rarely left home, and when he did, he was met with angry shouts. The once private family drama had become a national spectacle. Inside police headquarters, frustration was growing. They had enough circumstantial evidence to suspect foul play, but not enough to charge anyone with murder. There was no body, no weapon, no confession. Without those, the case remained maddeningly incomplete. Yet, even as time passed, detectives continued to uncover disturbing contradictions. Phone records showed gaps in Justin's story. GPS data revealed movements of cars linked to the family during the early hours of the morning. One vehicle, registered to his girlfriend, was driven to a nearby town the same night Ayla disappeared. When questioned, Courtney said she couldn't remember why. Investigators also learned that Ayla had recently broken her arm, an injury that Justin claimed had been an accident. But medical experts raised questions about the story. The fracture was severe, consistent with a twisting force rather than a fall. When police pressed Justin about it, he grew visibly agitated. By spring 2012, the case had reached a boiling point. The public demanded arrests. Police held a press conference, announcing that they believed Ayla Reynolds was dead, and that the people inside the house that night knew more than they were saying. "The evidence leads us to conclude that foul play occurred," a state police spokesman said. "We believe those in the home have withheld information." It was as close as investigators could come to naming suspects without pressing charges. The words hit Waterville like a thunderclap. Trista collapsed upon hearing the announcement. She had clung to hope for months, telling herself her daughter might still be alive. Now, that hope was gone. But for her, grief quickly turned to anger. She demanded justice, calling Justin and his family cowards who were hiding the truth. "They killed her," she told reporters, "and they're pretending they didn't." Justin's family fired back, accusing Trista of using the media to smear them. They claimed the police had mishandled the investigation and that the real kidnapper was still out there. But few believed them. The once quiet town was now divided between those who demanded accountability and those who still clung to the hope that Ayla might be alive somewhere. Through it all, one fact remained undeniable. Every piece of physical evidence pointed back to that house. The walls had been scrubbed, the floors cleaned, and yet the traces of blood, the one thing that could not lie, told their own story. And that story whispered a horrifying truth. Ayla Reynolds didn't disappear into the night. She was lost inside her own home. Years passed, but the question that haunted Maine never faded. Where is Ayla Reynolds? By 2013, the search for her had become one of the most extensive and expensive missing child investigations in state history. Hundreds of interviews, thousands of man-hours, rivers drained, woods combed, and still, no sign of the little girl. For every lead that surfaced, another dead end followed. The trail had gone cold, but the grief had not. Public pressure on police mounted. Each anniversary brought renewed vigils and angry headlines. No arrests, no justice, no closure. The words became almost ritual, but investigators never closed the case. Behind the scenes, they continued to gather evidence, quietly, methodically, hoping for a confession, a discovery, a break that never came. For Trista Reynolds, Ayla's mother, time did not heal anything. It only deepened the wound. She became the face of the fight for answers, speaking at rallies, confronting law enforcement, and keeping her daughter's name alive in every interview. "Someone in that house knows what happened," she said repeatedly, "and I will not stop until they tell the truth." Her resolve stood in sharp contrast to Justin DiPietro's silence. After the police declared Ayla's case a homicide, he virtually disappeared from public life. No press appearances, no interviews, no vigils. The man who once claimed his daughter had been kidnapped now refused to talk about her at all. In 2017, nearly 6 years after the disappearance, a small but significant legal step was taken. A probate judge officially declared Ayla Reynolds dead. The ruling was a formality, one that allowed her mother to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin DiPietro and the other adults in the house. But it also symbolized something much deeper. A final acknowledgement that the little girl was never coming home. For Trista, it was both a relief and a heartbreak. "At least now the law recognizes what I've known for years," she said. "But there's still no justice." The lawsuit accused Justin, his sister Alicia, and his girlfriend Courtney Roberts of causing Ayla's death and conspiring to cover it up. It was a civil case, not criminal, but it forced the DiPietro family back into the public eye. Through court documents, chilling details emerged. The blood patterns, the timeline inconsistencies, the lies that had followed every interview. Justin, through his lawyer, continued to deny any involvement. "He maintains his innocence," the attorney said. "He had nothing to do with Ayla's disappearance." But for the public, patience had long since run out. The court of opinion had already delivered its verdict. The tragedy of Ayla Reynolds became a symbol, not just of loss, but of frustration with a justice system that could not act without a body. Prosecutors said they believed Ayla was dead, and that the evidence pointed to foul play. But without physical remains, their hands were tied. "We know what happened," one investigator told local media off record. "We just can't prove it in court." The absence of Ayla's body became the case's most haunting feature, the silence at its center. No one could say where she was, how she died, or where she had been hidden. The house had been searched, the rivers dragged, the fields scanned with cadaver dogs. Nothing. Even as years passed, the image of the little girl, blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile wide enough to melt hearts, remained etched into Maine's collective memory. Every December, candles flickered outside the Waterville police station. Residents whispered prayers, some still clinging to the impossible hope that maybe, somehow, she had survived. But hope had turned into memory, and memory into a ghost. In 2021, the civil lawsuit moved forward. Trista's attorneys argued that Ayla's death was the result of negligence and violence within the home. They presented forensic photographs, witness statements, and reports that had never been seen by the public. It was a devastating reminder of how close the truth had always been, and how unreachable justice could feel without it. Outside the courthouse, Trista spoke to reporters. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told the story of a decade of pain. "They think because there's no body, they can hide forever," she said. "But the truth doesn't go away. Ayla's still here, in this town, in this fight, in every person who refuses to forget her." The crowd behind her applauded softly, holding signs that read, "Justice for Ayla," and "Her voice still matters." Meanwhile, Justin DiPietro had left Maine. His whereabouts were uncertain, his life a shadow of what it had once been. In the public imagination, he had become a ghost, too. Not missing, but gone all the same. To this day, no one has been charged with Ayla Reynolds' murder. The official stance of the Maine State Police remains unchanged. We believe Ayla is deceased. We believe the people in the home that night know more than they have told us. And so the case remains open, not for lack of knowledge, but for lack of evidence that can speak. In the end, the story of Ayla Reynolds is not just a mystery. It is a mirror, reflecting the fragility of justice, the cruelty of silence, and the endurance of a mother's love. It asks the question that no one in Waterville has ever been able to answer. If everyone knows the truth, why does no one say it out loud?